Welcome to the Immigrant Entrepreneurs Podcast, episode 13. My name is Alina Warwick, and today I have such a great honor to chat with Sean Conlon. You guys, I have to say that this guy is so full of laughter and so full of life. You're going to absolutely love this episode. Sean went to college to study entrepreneurship back home in Ireland, but he had to quit to make ends meet to help his family. He got into real estate in his early 20s shortly after arriving to the States, and in 1997 got a $1 million signing bonus, all because he was considered one of the best brokers. He was generating anywhere from $700,000 to $1 million a month in commissions within 3 years of starting real estate. In this episode, he'll explain the little tactics that he did that was out of the norm that made him insanely successful. Sean is also a TV star. He hosted the show The Deed on CNBC. He definitely dropped some amazing and powerful advice in this episode to all the aspiring immigrant entrepreneurs. So turn up the volume, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Let's dive right in. Well, Sean, thank you so much for coming on to this podcast. And I'm really excited and honored to have you on my show where I'm going to learn so much about your immigrant entrepreneur journey. So how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. I'm in Palm Beach, Florida, so it's a nice place to be.
Awesome. Love it. Let's talk about your immigrant journey. Tell us where you're from and when did you come to the States?
Okay, so you'll be able to tell by my accent, even after 30 years in America, I'm from Ireland originally. So I was born in Birmingham, England. My father was a bus driver there, and my mother worked as a teacher. I grew up in a very small village in Ireland, and there were 7 of us, 2 parents and 5 kids, in a basically, for all intents and purposes, a 2-room, 2-bedroom sort of house. A very small little house, but everybody was poor in Ireland. So you didn't know you were poor till you left, right? But it was, of course, everybody has different takes on growing up. I think it was a wonderful place to grow up in. We had some very tough times, which were the makings of who I am. I had pretty incredible parents. My father was a consummate dreamer and a failed entrepreneur countless times, but he had a wonderful tendency to go from failure to failure without a lack of enthusiasm, as I believe somebody once said about entrepreneurship. My mother was a tough woman who focused on her education, and she worked several jobs to keep the family together. But, she cried herself to sleep most nights because she was trying to figure out how she'd feed 5 little kids. Mm-hmm. So that's been ingrained in me. And people who know me really, really well, which is not too many people, that's burnt into my soul, despite my incredibly positive drive, which I have, and positive attitude, that can't help but have an impact on you. And that's what has driven me to my success levels.
So when I think of Ireland, I feel like there's so many properties and lots of cattle and sheep. Did you guys grow up on a farm by any chance?
No, that would denote that we had some wealth. So no, we grew up in a little house adjacent to the farms. But that being said, the country has and had a wonderful focus on literature and reading and writing and education. And I would say, having grown up in an age that we didn't have social media or computers, and frankly, we didn't get a home phone till I was maybe 14 or 15 years old. I was never went to a restaurant, but we had a library, and I was obsessed with going to the library. And it was my escape, and it allowed me to dream. And I thought myself falconry because I read about it in the library. I thought myself fly fishing, which are passions that I maintain to this day. And I read about every major entrepreneur in America. So I read about the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and Gettys and all these amazing families. And I read about Churchill. And what's quite interesting is, and my father's not alive today. I wished he lived long enough to see me achieve all of his dreams. He lived long enough to see me achieve a lot of them. I throw a Christmas party every year in Mayfair in London, and purely serendipitously, members of every single family I read about in that little library when I was 12 years old come to my Christmas party. So it's quite a story at this stage.
So amazing. So amazing. Yeah. I love it. So when did you come to the States?
So I got my place in college. I was top of, my class in high school, but I also worked very hard, so I wouldn't say that things came naturally to me. Now, from the outside, people think everything I do very easily. I like to say I'm like a duck. I'm very calm on the surface and paddling furiously underneath the water. But I got my place in college, but quite interestingly, I didn't get my dream. I qualified to go to Trinity College, which is this fabulous university we have that was founded in the 1500s, to study zoology and archaeology, which are two of my major passions. But I got my place, but I didn't get enough points to get a free scholarship. So it was incredibly bitter. I qualified to get in, but couldn't go. So I studied, of all things, you like this, entrepreneurship at a college in Ireland. And I was there for a couple of years, and things got very tough at home. And my father was kind of going broke again, and he got sick. He had a heart attack. And I thought, you know what, I have to go and work. So I went to London, which was a natural course for Irish people at the time, went to London. In the 80s, we had the Troubles, as we called them, where the Irish in Northern Ireland, there was a lot of trouble. So they were bombing London at the time. So being Irish was a very bad thing to be. We were widely discriminated against, but I also understood both sides. And I applied to 100 places, and I eventually got a job, quite interestingly, with an American bank. And it was a very minor job, but it was at a company called Lehman, which, of course, everybody knows Lehman Brothers in America. Right. They went broke in 2008. I just want to go on the record and say I was not responsible. I worked for
Did you take part of it?
None whatsoever. I worked there in 1988, 89, 90. So I was very minor. So not my fault at all. And then I loaded mail trains at night. So I would work in the day in the bank, and then I would take off my suit and put on a mail, like a sort of overalls, and load mail trains. So I worked 2 jobs, and then I would get home at midnight, and I'm standing on the train platform 1990, I'm standing on the train platform, and I'd watch everybody come in and out every day and be average. And I thought, God, all those people I read about in those books in the library, none of them were average, and none of them wrote about getting the little briefcase and riding the train every day to work. So I basically got off the train one evening and never went back to work. I mean, I sent a note and said I'm not coming back, and told my parents I'm going to try and go to America and make it, because my father always told me that you could be anything you wanted in America. And we grew up on that America, that you really could make it in America. So I came to America in 1990.
How old were you when you came?
I was turning 21.
21.
And I had come as a student one summer and had just been fascinated. And we had like 5th cousins. So they used to visit us from time to time. And I was blown away by how they seemed to have so much of everything compared to us. And ironically, their grandson ended up working at my merchant bank some years ago.
So you left the Lehman Bank in London, and you never returned. So now you're at a place where you don't have a job. And the very first thing that comes to your mind is to fly to America.
That's correct. And it, of course, had been in my, my wish list, dream, bucket list. I thought that I could make it in America. So I decided I would go. And I knew one person, which was a distant cousin. And I knew nothing else really about the country other than what I'd read and seen once. And I took a shot. And, I took a massive step back, because I went from having a very average job in an investment bank to where I was technically an illegal immigrant and painting apartments and shoveling snow and, doing incredibly menial labor.
And did you land in Chicago?
I did land in Chicago. And my distant cousin got me a job at a building, working as an assistant to a janitor. And that poor janitor was a saint because I was the most useless individual ever around the building. I mean, seriously, the least handy Irish guy ever. Useless at everything.
Wow. Amazing. So tell me a little bit about the struggles that you had to go through when you first immigrated to the States. And I'm sure the cold was probably one of them.
I mean, the cold is definitely one of them. But, it's interesting. So much time has gone, and I'm 51 now, and it seems like yesterday I arrived. I was here. I'm actually here 30 years this month. I was scared, and I was obviously lonely, and I was homesick, and of course, I knew I couldn't go back because I didn't have my paperwork. And I also knew I couldn't go back because I told everybody I was going to America to be a millionaire. So there's a great analogy. I spoke some years ago at Wharton and Cornell, and I painted this picture. Back in the 8th, 9th century, the Vikings, were a group of marauding individuals who liked to bang around Europe, and, they burnt down villages and did all the usual diabolical stuff. But one day they showed up and they burnt their boat. And what did that mean? That meant that they had come to stay. And that is the analogy I give for America. When I arrived here, I had no retreat strategy. There was no way out. I was either going to make it or die trying. And that's the beginning of my story in America.
What did you bring to the States with you?
A dream. And one bag and really bad clothes and nothing else. I found a black and white television in the alley. I couldn't believe that people threw things out. I was shocked by how much stuff people had when I got here. And I'm still shocked.
Right. Any savings? No savings?
I had $500, which was my savings. I supported my parents. And you can see sometimes on Instagram, I post little letters that my father had saved. And when he died, my mother found them. And they're all the little letters I wrote every week to my parents, sending them money and stuff. So I'd no real money. Yeah, I was scared to death.
Okay, so let's follow that path. You were assistant to the janitor. How long were you doing that job, and then you moved on to the next thing?
I did that for about 3 years.
Okay.
Well, and I would paint houses sometimes at night, and sometimes people wouldn't pay me in the end because they'd realize I didn't have the paperwork, so they would figure out they could take advantage of me. So I got hardened very quickly. I mean, I showed up in America bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and just, people have a tendency from Ireland to be generally very sweet people, but I got schooled and seasoned very quickly.
And then what did you decide? You're not going to be doing that? You're going to go to the next thing?
Well, I thought I could be something. And, again, I figured my paperwork out eventually. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to get my real estate license. And so everybody said, well, why would you get your real estate license? And coming from Ireland, you just touched on it. We have a passion for property and real estate. And I'll tell you why that is. Up until the turn of the century, Irish people were not allowed generally own property because of English rule. So we were obsessed with owning property. And I have that same gene in me. And I thought, I can do this. I can sell real estate. And I felt that I had a decent handle on people. And today at 51, if you ask me what my gift is, and I have lots of things I'm not good at, but people say I'm great at real estate. Well, no, I'm great with people. I can connect the dots, and you can drop me into a room and I can read people. That's what I do. So I thought, I wasn't able to vocalize what I thought I was good at back then, but that was it. So I got my real estate license, and I would work my day job as an assistant janitor and then go every night and cold call.
Did you know anyone in real estate? How did you come up with that idea?
No one. I knew nobody in real estate. I walked into an office, a little scrubby office, and I asked them if they would hire me. It was very funny. I still know them to this day. I mean, they were shocked. And obviously I wasn't good, but I would cold call every night, and I had no success for 6 months, but I would come in every night and keep trying, and I kind of think that having subsequently had thousands of brokers who've worked for me, I can recognize that skill set. I mean, you can't give up. I was always a day away from nearly giving up, but I never really gave up. And there's a wonderful quote, you guys check it out there. It's a kind of little prose called Don't Quit. And it's really wonderful. And it explains, about not giving up. And I didn't. And I kept going and kept going. And honestly, a smarter person would have given up. There's no question.
How long did you cold call until you got your breakthrough?
So I cold called for 6 months. And I said every open house that the people of the company wanted me to do and all those things. And then just, one day I got a little, call back, and I sold a $24,000 condo and made $300. And I'm like, this is it. I can do this. So that was like 93, 97, just to give you a little perspective. So that was 93, 97. I got $1 million signing bonus because I was technically considered one of the best brokers in North America at that stage, that quickly. I was generating about $700,000 to $1 million a month in commissions 3 years later.
And so all in doing what? How did you keep on cold calling, or how did you pursue those?
Cold calling is how I started. But then I started driving around the neighborhoods, and I saw these guys building 1 or 2 rental buildings. And I went to them and I said, look, what if I could sell these as condos? And they're like, well, nobody buys condos in this neighborhood. I'm like, give me a listing for 30 days. And I sold the first building from the plans in about a week. And I'm like, this is the future. So I went up and down every street within this area I'd selected near Wrigley Field and put contracts under every door of a house that appeared like you could tear it down. And I kind of focused in on something, amazing. Everybody's looking for some brilliant silver bullet, and sometimes it's right in front of you. Well, Wrigley Field was a wonderful neighborhood, but there's lots of little scruffy single houses. And I had so much time in the office for the 6 months not selling that I kind of taught myself the zoning book. And I like to give this example to people. It was like I taught myself juggling. It was a useless talent till the circus came to town, right? So point of the story is I learned off the zoning, and then I suddenly realized that you could tear down all these little single houses and build 3 and 4 units on them. And I had such an encyclopedic knowledge. You could give me an address on a street, and I would have been able to tell you that lot actually was 3 to 4 feet deeper than every other lot on the street. So that's kind of, I did the homework. I had the preparation done. When my opportunity came, I was ready. And, your eureka moment, you don't recognize it at the time. I don't know anyone in my life who has. You recognize it in hindsight. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I feel like you did something that no one has done, right? You went to that builder and you said, hey, let me put a contract on there. And they said, no one has ever sold a condo here. No one's going to buy a condo, right?
Yes. I asked. I did the basic thing. I tried. And maybe the world now seems a little, with social media, people are more willing to maybe be ballsy and take chances. It was still old school, and I was, getting above my pay grade, but I asked and it worked. And so I became a one-stop shop. What was kind of remarkable was that I wasn't just a broker. So let's say you were talking to your husband one evening, you're like, hey, I'd like to be a property developer. And people say, go see Sean Conlon. So you'd come in, I'd sit you down, I'd talk with you, I'd learn a little bit about you. Then I would take out a blueprint and say, do you like this building? And you're like, yes. And then I'd take out the neighborhood map and say, you like this neighborhood? And you'd be like, yes. I'd be like, okay, well, I have a lot here. This is the building you can build. I've got a general contractor for you. The architect's lined up, obviously, with the plan here. I have a bank that will finance it. And you would leave my office that night as a one-stop shop developer. I would do soup to nuts for you. And I did that for hundreds and hundreds of people in Chicago who became developers. Some very successful, some not. But that's what I did. I was a one-stop shop for people who wanted to become developers.
How did you morph into that? How did you become,
I mean, I'd love to have a real answer for that. I mean, seriously, it was just organic. And I guess I'll tell you this is a well-known fact in Chicago. I outworked everybody. So I did so much extra work, I was able to do the preparation, put it together. And it got that I got so competitive later in my career in the 90s when I would go to, the Mediterranean for 2 weeks because I love to travel. I would leave my car out front of my office and my light on so that my competitors were still stressed, because when I was in town, I was in the office till 1 and 2 a.m. every night anyway. So I had my lights on still at night. I had my team put them on and leave my car out front so that my competitors were stressed. Meanwhile, I'm on a yacht in the Med.
I love it. I love it. And I'm sure you have plenty of more stories like that.
I'm sure I do.
All right. So how old were you when you started real estate, or when you started your brokerage company? Mm-hmm.
So I started selling real estate when I was 23. So I was 29, 30. And so my last year selling real estate, there's always figures bandied about, but I had a small team of salespeople. My last year, I probably did close to $250 million at a $350,000 average price point.
Wow.
I was massively prolific. But again, back then we didn't track it the way you do now. And obviously you now have $1 million listing and people promote themselves. And I was just, busy doing my job. So I'd started to realize that I had lots of little systems that I was putting within my company that I thought would be good. And I thought I was somewhat definitely contrarian. Today you call what I was doing a disruptor, right?
Right.
We didn't have that word back then. And I also candidly was getting burnt out as a broker. I sold 890 something properties my last year. And I had 2 pagers and 3 phones, and I would be beeping in my head all night. And I genuinely reached a burnout point, and I thought I want to go to the next level. So I developed this little system, and I was in negotiations with a pretty serious media company that pulled out at the 11th hour because you're going to love this. They figured that they would lose too many advertisers, real estate advertisers, if they ever tried to go online. So this was 99, 2000. So I was like, okay. So what I did was every week I took out a full page ad in the paper in a dark green color with a funny quote, coming soon, or we're about to clean up the real estate industry. And then I would put in parentheses, I just need to find the guys who handle that whole Exxon Valdez thing, right? So, which was a big oil spill back in the time, or announcing a bold new vision for real estate. And then I put in parentheses, I know that sounds like a code of ethics for used car sales. So I ran all these really controversial ads with an address and a phone number with no other details. So I got a huge amount of buzz. And then I opened, I think, January 6, 2000, and everybody knew I was opening. It was all over the papers and a huge amount of media. And we even had real estate brokers complain to the real estate board that I was insulting the industry, which is quite funny.
You're disrupting the real estate industry.
So what did I do that was different? Well, you're too young to recall these, but I was considered one of the largest users of BlackBerries in North America in the early 2000s. So I gave every single one of my agents a handheld device. And now that, of course, big deal. Nobody did that. So I had a centralized scheduling system, and it was people could prove at the time that our showings we were probably showing 4 to 5 times more properties than our competitors, because we'd streamlined the process, we'd communicated with a centralized scheduling number, but everybody in my company was connected by their BlackBerries, their hand, which of course is natural today, but no one did that.
Wow.
And every buyer for the first year of a company, we gave them a laptop when they purchase a property from us. And, probably within 14 months, we'd sold over $1 billion of real estate.
Wow.
It was wildly successful.
That's amazing. From BlackBerries and laptops.
Yes. And a 100-hour work week.
Wow. Amazing. Did you have to raise any capital to start your business?
No. I mean, I had the good fortune, of course, at that stage to be, one of the top brokers in North America. So I was making a decent amount of money. So I used my own capital. So that was a fortunate thing, because I know how hard that is. And I've been up and down. And listen, I've been knocked down since. It hasn't been a straight line up, I've had the same route where I've had wins and losses and stuff like that. But that was a pretty golden time, and I'm pretty proud of what I did. And I had a lot of people copied what I did, which is, of course, a compliment. And subsequently, I sold the company 2 years later to a group that was backed by Sendent Rheology. And I bought it back maybe 4 years again after that and fixed it up and sold it again. So kind of that gift gave me a couple of times.
Awesome. Awesome. And how did you deal with the 2008 housing market crash?
Well, I would say the 2008 market crash really made me who I am today. I had amazing success from like 94 till 2007. And I like to joke. I mean, I had some curveballs, but not really. I like to joke that had I fallen out of like the, Empire State Building, there would have been a mattress convention underneath it. I could do no wrong. I mean, I walked on water, it seemed. And I had stopped paying attention to everything. And I had, 6 houses and lots of things like that. And I was not managing my own money. And I had a mezzanine fund, and we'd over $100 million on the street. And I personally, through my sort of merchant bank / fund, funded $1.2 billion of new construction across North America. But I was paying no attention, and I had, quote unquote, hired guys from Harvard and Yale and Wharton, who I figured were that much smarter than me. But, nobody cares about your own money. And when the world blew up, it was, initially I was out of touch. And then I realized, oh my God, we're really in trouble here, and everybody who could leave was going to get a better job. So I took my company back over and I knuckled down, and it was scary. I flew all over the country to save assets. And I got so bad that in 2010, I sold my car for $31,000 to meet payroll.
Wow.
But I never stopped believing in myself. I never dumped an asset. I kept every asset I owned. And I doubled down with the remaining capital I had to buy out senior positions on mezz deals. And I came back. But it was 5 years, it was 5 years of hell. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But you know what? It taught me, for a period of time in my head, I thought maybe I got lucky the first time. But that taught me that I wasn't lucky. I was actually good and tenacious. And it humbled me massively. I've always been a little cocky, but I never obnoxious. But it humbled me. It showed me that Neil Admir is a Latin expression, be surprised by nothing. It just showed me that you can't be surprised by anything. And so the pandemic has been a crazy time, but I was prepared. I had money set aside. I wasn't levered. So I've come into properly prepared. But it was the makings of me change who I am. It made me better. It made me a better businessman. It also made me realize that all these things I had that I thought represented who I was, it didn't. Things don't represent who you are. I realized I didn't need any of them. So now I can afford all those things, and I don't have any of them. I don't want them. I mean, I have a wonderful art collection and a nice home, in London and a place in Palm Beach, but I don't have lots of things anymore. And that all came from 2008.
So it took you 5 years after the market crash in 2008 to redevelop and get back on your feet.
Yeah, five years to really get my feet back underneath me. So, and it was never fully right till, several years ago, but I'm stronger and I think I'm smarter and I'm better and I'm more streamlined now. So my lesson was learned. Now, that didn't stop me starting a new brokerage in 2009. So I was a glutton for punishment. I went again and I sold that company to Compass 3 years ago. Yes.
So how many companies do you have now?
I just have Conlon & Co., the merchant bank. But what we do is fascinating. It's a boutique merchant bank. We probably have all told 10 people. What I do now is I firstly have a network that's probably, $1 trillion of net worth of people I know, right? Meaning I can pick the phone up. I don't tell you I know someone unless I know them. I have a lot of people who, are in the movie business and billionaires, and they invest alongside me. But I also invest my own money in the deal. So I don't broker anymore. I don't do anything like that. I buy pieces of companies or pieces of deals and bring capital in alongside me. So I connect super high net worth people to really good deals. And I would say 70% of it's real estate and 30% of it is, investment. So for example, a really cool deal I did, the most famous short seller in the world is a guy called Jim Chanos. Jim Chanos is the gentleman who broke Enron. The short seller bets against bad companies, right? So he will have detectives follow guys at places like Enron to see if they're behaving badly, and we bet against them. Well, he decided that he needed a strategic partner who was, he's in his 60s, he teaches at Yale, and he decided he needed a partner who was connected and brought a whole new level of something else's business. And I was super flattered. We knew each other very well socially. We would have dinner in the Greek islands. And he read an article about me in the Financial Times and called me up and said, I'd love to sit with you. So I ended up buying a strategic interest in his hedge fund. It's like about $2 billion hedge fund. And I have introduced him to basically some of the richest families on the planet. We just got off a call today with a family that's probably worth $100 billion. And they're people I know. So I know all these people and I connect them. I've built their trust up. I'm not hustling. I'm not looking for anything. I'm just making the connection and it goes from there.
What do you think was your secret sauce to building that network?
So I inherited something from my father, which is my father had an incredible love of life. He never met it, but he had a magic about him. And everybody says that about, the parents that they're obsessed with. But when my father died, we had a village of maybe 900 people and 1,000 people came to my father's funeral, and just a comment. And he just had a magic about him. So I'm not claiming I have that, but people never forget me when they meet me and I make an impression and, people like to be around me, it seems. And I love life. So that when I say people love to be around me, I don't mean that conceitedly. I mean, I have such a passion for living and life and whatever I do. I think that's something people are attracted to. And I believe I'm incredibly authentic. And authenticity is much underrated these days in a world where you can make up your personality on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. So I think that was a big key to my success, and I truly was the living proof that I did extraordinary things, but I considered myself a fairly normal person. And I think people are massively attracted to the fact that, wow, here's a guy who really didn't have any edge or any angle or anything that set him apart. But his sheer desire and work ethic made him do it. And you know what? I could too. A lot of very rich people like their kids to come and work for me or intern with me because I think they believe I instill a value in them that it's hard to give to your kids if they inherit their money.
Amazing. Amazing. That's so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to touch base on what you said earlier, which is those letters that you sent to your parents.
Yes.
And I'm looking at one that you posted on your Instagram page, and I think that one is 1989. And you said something about, I'm saving hard for my building so you too can retire. And this is in your early stages, right? This is probably when you were not filthy rich.
No, right? Delusional might be the appropriate take on that letter at this stage.
But I wanna focus in on this because I think it's so powerful to write things down, to dream big, and then to see it come into fruition. So what were your thoughts when you were writing these letters and saying, you are going to retire and I'm saving hard for my building so you too can retire? Can you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can, and again, at the time you can't, but it came from an incredibly sad place because my parents were amazing, and my father had obviously struggled so much, and I couldn't believe how unfair life was. So I was driven massively to do something for my father, and at the time I was disappointing myself, and I felt maybe then because I was in London, I was loading, mail trains at night, and my father loved us all equally. He made us all feel like we were the most special kids in the world, but he had an extra interest And he believed that I really was going to do something because I was just such a curious kid, and I was always bringing him, little ideas and little businesses I was working on. I always had little businesses. So I was just trying to tell them that I really was going to make it, and I wanted to keep them going till I could, because things were very bad for us back then, and the bank was coming to take the house. But I'm just going to jump back to explain this bit of that story.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 8, I was run over by a drunk driver.
Wow.
As only you can in Ireland, coming home from school at 3 in the day. And so there's your stereotype. I got run over by a drunk driver, and I could tell my mother was mad, but I was underneath the car covered in blood.
Oh
And
my goodness.
I went off to the hospital. I was in the hospital for weeks and weeks. And, my parents really couldn't come to see me because they'd loads of other kids and jobs and trying to survive. And so then I thought I'd done something wrong. So then I thought I was, I suppose if it was in America, I'd be in therapy over that. I thought I'd done something wrong. And I swore, God, if I ever see them again, I'll be really good. So anyway, my dad borrowed a Mercedes car and came and got me. And for the rest of my life, a Mercedes and my father and Johnny Cash and the HVAC player. And this was the vision. And I said, when I make it, I'm going to buy my father that car. And we used to look in the window of the car dealership in our little village every Christmas. And my father would say, oh, that's a very rich person. Look, that car, they're getting it for Christmas. And it seemed so foreign to me. So I left home in 88, and kind of then didn't see my parents from 1990 till 95, which was incredibly tough and lonely. But I'd saved up my money, and I bought my father a Mercedes for Christmas. It was the coolest thing I've ever done. I mean, I've subsequently, met kings and princes and movie stars, and spent time at the White House and met all the presidents. But that's still the greatest thing I've ever done in my entire life, was buy my father that car in 95, and he died in 2000, but I retired him for like the last 3 years sort of his life, and I bought the house back. And my father lived long enough to see me have 300 employees, and I had Ted Kennedy and Bill Clinton write to him, and
wow,
he got to come visit me at my 8,000 square foot mansion in Chicago. So It was cool. It was very cool.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. I love that. And I love the fact that you were at that point of just, I'm going to make it happen no matter what. And then you wrote it down and sent it to your parents. And then it just all came into fruition, of course, with a lot of hard work. But I think that is where it initially starts. If you write it down, you set your goals straight, and then you just push it through, which is amazing.
Look, you're absolutely right. And sometimes people make bombastic statements, but actually I understand why. I sometimes say things like, Conlon and Co. is going to be $1 billion merchant bank in the next 3 years. Now, while that may not seem feasible, if I say it, I got to do it.
Amen.
And now it's out in the public, and that is part of my thing. And the writing that letter was, I'm going to write this down, and I'm going to send it to my parents. So A, they have hope, and B, I've just written a contract with myself, and I got to live up to it.
I'm getting goosebumps over here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
No problem.
So, Sean, what do you think most prepared you to launch your business and to continue the growth of your business? Now, I know you said that you've read a lot of those books at the library at a very young age. Do you think that is what kind of started that preparation, or was there anything else?
No. Well, yes and no. But so to answer your question, say absolutely. In an age where we have a zero attention span, people should not forget the magic of reading and dreaming. That's what prepared me. I read voraciously and I dreamed. And I'm not saying read about real estate. Read about people who achieved amazing things, right? Read about people who, were explorers. Read about people who achieved the impossible because they believed they could. So that's what prepared me to make it. My reading and my dreaming. I mean, it was that basic. I'd love to say there was some other incredible silver bullet, other than the fact I did work 100 hours a week when I was starting the company. but I read so much and I dreamed. And when I would get beat up, I would read something that would inspire me and I would go again. So, yeah, don't ever discount the value of reading or listening to podcasts like this, because this is our modern version of like reading a book. Like I would listen to somebody on your podcast and I would be like, yes, I can do that. And that is kind of the purpose of what you do, right?
Right. Learning from others that have already gone through that journey.
Yes, and you're bringing the message to your listeners and say, you guys can do this. Listen to this guy. He's not exceptional, but he did extraordinary things because he believed he could.
Awesome. I love it. Did you have any mentors that helped you out in the beginning stages?
Not really. So I had my distant cousin who I worked for in the janitorial business, and he was nice to me and cool when I was lonely and sad. So, he was supportive, but he found my dreams just ludicrous and delusional and ridiculous. And we're still very close. And he's very proud of me. But I mean, he thought I was insane. He's like, because he grew up in America in the nice normal suburbs and, well-to-do, inherited some buildings. And he's like, are you insane? And yeah, I guess I was insane. I was crazy enough to believe I could.
I love it. So let's talk a little bit about The Deed. How did you go about hosting the reality TV series The Deed on CNBC?
Yeah.
Did CNBC find you, or was it the other way around?
No. So this is going to shock you. You'll obviously see I've had a huge amount of media in my life. Until I got the TV show, I never had a PR person in my life or a publicist. And I only got a publicist when I got the TV show because CNBC said you need one because God knows what you're going to say on an interview because you seem to say exactly what you think. So so they were horrified every time I got onto a radio station or a TV station because I'm just going to say what I'm thinking.
And what's wrong with that?
Oh, of course. No, I'm nothing like controversial, I'm wonderfully liberal and laissez-faire. I'm live and let live and, all of the above things. This is a wonderful story. So when I was the assistant janitor in the building, you kind of got a bounty to turn somebody in who wasn't on the lease. And we had a very funny fellow in the building called Bob Title. And Bob's nickname for me was Subtitles because he said I barely spoke English. So I'll get to the punchline. So Bob's this incredibly talented and incredibly successful person now. But in 1994, he's walking up the street and he told a story. He spoke at Columbia, I believe, in New York. And he'd given up raising his money for his first movie. And he sees a Range Rover end of 94. And he's like, nobody had a Range Rover. He said, I'd seen a picture of one once with the Queen and some African dictator. He said, who gets out of the Range Rover? Subtitles, which was me. I'm like, hey, Bob, what's up? He's like, did you steal this? I'm like, no, man, I'm in real estate. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, well, I was trying to make a movie, but I've come up short. I said, how short? He's like, 10 grand. I'm like, oh. So I wrote him a check for $7,000. I'm sure I didn't have it in the bank account, but I signed the check with a big flourish. And that's when you had checks. I had a check in my bag. So I gave him money and he went off and he made Men of Honor, The Barbershop, Biggie, Tupac, The Hate You Give. Wow. Incredibly prolific movie maker, and married the first native-born Prime Minister of Bermuda's daughter. I mean, totally married up and made it. So in 2008, he's working with CNBC on a kind of real estate show. And he asked me if I would come along as his, advisor to give him gravitas in the industry. And he brought me along. And end of 08, 09, CNBC said at the meeting, they're like, okay, Bob, we love you, but this guy, Conlon, we want to do a show with him. And I declined because they wanted me to play a real estate mogul on television. But unlike Donald Trump, who's very good at playing a mogul on television, whether he had money or not, I was afraid I was going broke in the next year, and I couldn't authentically be on television telling people how to do real estate if I wasn't sure I knew how to. So I declined, and I kept declining, and every year I kept declining, and they kept coming back to me. And after about 4 years, I was back, or 5 years, and I was back and I had my feet on. I mean, they came back and they said, we've designed a show for you and we think you're perfect for part of it. So I did it. And it was incredibly interesting and stimulating. I've done 2 seasons, and we had talks about a third season, but I'll say it here. First time I haven't said it, but it took 100 days to film. And while it's been an incredible bucket list item, unless you want to be famous, which I don't, or well known, it's quite a twin-edged sword. You rarely get really good things come from being on television. You get a lot of unwanted attention and people calling you about stuff. And I've achieved enough at this stage to not need the television thing. So I'm probably going to pass on a season 3. Now, that being said, I've been offered an incredibly cool travel show, really important TV station here, and that's piqued my interest. A real estate travel show. I mean, come on. I can't say who it's with, but it's kind of a incredible opportunity. So we'll see.
Hey, if you need me somewhere in the background, I'll be able to volunteer.
Good. Well, I'll be giving you a call because I will visit all sorts of incredible real estate around the world is the proposed idea. Sounds like a dream gig, doesn't it? This travel show is with one of the most major networks in the world, and it would be in actually the most important time slot. And I got that because the guy who runs programming for them 20 years ago, he made my business cards. Helped me make my business cards. Wow. And I didn't know this, but he reminded me this after. He called me up and he said, hey, would you be interested in doing a show for this television station? I was like, wow, what are you doing over there? He's like, well, I run programming. I'm like, what? So it turns out he left Chicago and went to work way overseas in Asia. And his mother had died at the time he worked for me. And I'd gone to the funeral, but I didn't know them. But I remembered a year later, 2 days before the Cubs opening game, that his father used to go every year for 30 or 40 years with his mother. And I thought, that poor man must be really lonely. So I owned a box at the time at Wrigley Field, and I don't understand baseball. I knew nothing about the game, and I never went to the box. So I sent a car and got him and his family and had them all driven to Wrigley Field on his mother's basically anniversary. Wow. And I forgot I'd done that. And the guy from the TV station told me that last month that I did that 20 years ago, and I'd forgotten I'd done it. So that goes back to our last point. Yeah. And him and I did stay in touch by email all the time, just I didn't know what he was doing anymore. I won't do a season 3 of The Deed. I've done it. It's wonderful. It was incredibly, and it was all real. I did use all my own money, and everybody saw on that show. Here's the really fulfilling bit. And you asked me in some of my questions how I give back. Well, when that show ended, it would have been very easy to move on, but I stayed and made sure that everybody I'd started with, I helped finish up on my dime. So we went back on some of those deals, and I used my own money to finish it just because I wanted to help the people. And I'm going to say what was inspiring was 90% of the people on the show were just really good people who were taken advantage of. And, if you saw some of the shows, there was the one episode, particularly Letitia was a wonderful young African-American girl where the guy took advantage of her and jacked the basement up and the house was falling down and she was spending every penny and she was living with her grandmother. Well, I gave her a loan after the show. And do you know that we had no agreement on that? And she came to my office every month with a little check to pay me back in full, which was really fulfilling. And we got her out. We got all her money back. And it was fantastic. And that made me feel really good.
So amazing. And I love how you started the story about the CNBC with the story of when you gave the $7,000 check.
Yes.
Like how the world works is so amazing. When you do a good deed, it turns out to be tenfold in return.
So it does. So let me just touch on that briefly here.
Yeah.
So for a period of time after 2008, I was resentful and a little bit bitter because my default position is to be nice and kind and help people. But, I have a reputation for being tough. Once you cross a certain point, there's a great expression. Every once in a while, you have to shoot a hostage so people know you will. It's just good business. So, look, I have a wicked edge if I have to, but it's my least favorite approach to business. But I'd done so much for so many people and none of it had seemed to come back. And when I was on my own in 2009 and 10 and 11 and 12 trying to survive, I never asked anybody to help me. Nobody really offered, and I was a bit bitter about it. But in the last 3 years, I've seen more karma come from stuff I've done over the last 30 years. So yes, it does. Listen, it's not hard to be nice, and you don't need to be keeping a check register, but do things for people, generally speaking. But then there's a point in your career, here's my tough advice, where you have to flip and stop giving and start to call in some of your chips, because it's not maybe that the people who owe you the chips will, they forget, or they retire, or they've made so much money they don't care. So there's a time where you strike that point where you need to start to call back in some of your favors in addition to hoping for karma.
Love it. Love it. So Sean, I'm really interested to know, how do you look at failures and how do you overcome them?
So failures are obviously not failures if you get back up, right? There's so many cliches, You can't tell a champion by how he behaves when he's winning. You can tell a champion by how he behaves when he gets knocked down. I'm the consummate example of that. I get knocked down so much, but I get back up. I mean, Michael Jordan, of course, he's a god, but how many shots he takes to be that god? He misses a lot of shots, and he said that himself, He takes the crunch shot and he misses some. Well, failure is what makes you. It's easy to be great when you're winning, but the true measure of a man or woman is when they get knocked down, if they get back up. And that is, people will tell you that about me. I never give up, but I'm better for having been knocked down. Failure should be a teaching moment. It's not failure if you don't give up. And remember, most people give up. What's that statistic? They say, 97% of the people work for the 3% of the people who didn't give up, and that's it. So failure is not failure if you get back up. It's a teaching moment. You've learned something. I like to say there's very little to be learned from the second kick from the mule. So I'm so experienced because I've made so many mistakes, but you will find I've only made them once, except my fiance might disagree with you. She might say I continue to do the same stupid things all the time, but that's another conversation.
No, those are personal characteristics.
Yeah, I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot when it comes to that stuff.
No. Aren't we all, Sean? Aren't we all? So, Sean, let's chat a little bit about successes. And I know you've dropped in a little bit here and there, but are there any that you would like to outline today?
Yeah. So, so a couple of things. When I started in real estate, all the odds were stacked against me. I had a funny accent. I knew nobody in the country. And I got on the phone every night and I got a huge amount of rejection, but I kept going, right? I was incredibly driven. And 3 years later, I was a top broker in North America. Okay. I went from making $14,000 a year to millions and millions a year. Okay. I did that. I definitely had the decks fully stacked against me, but I did it. And I wrote down my little, wish list and put it on my refrigerator. Secondly, something else that I think goes a long way towards your success. I just finished today writing 5 handwritten notes to people. So, something that...
Did you say 500?
No, 5 handwritten notes. Yeah, but I used to write handwritten notes to everybody. It's so powerful. It's still so powerful. And I would say, talking about successes, I've had more success come back from people saying, God, that guy wrote me a handwritten note. I remember him. So what was my successes? I started one of the, fastest growing high-tech real estate companies in the country, right? I was a top broker in North America, probably. I have a TV show. I've done everything I've set out to do, but it was not a straight line. I got knocked down. I got knocked back. I had everything go wrong. But what's amazing? I'm a huge reader of history, and I'm particularly fascinated by the First World War and stuff like that. I visited the site a couple of years ago myself, and I couldn't help but think those men would go to bed at night, and if they survived the day and went to bed that night or slept on the mat, when they got up in the morning, the world could have changed and the war could be over. So the point I'm making is, just no matter how bad it gets, sometimes just go home to bed or go for a run or listen to a little music. Because when you get up in the morning, the sun rises again and you've got a brand new, fresh start to go again. So that's, that to me is success. The fact you live to fight another day. Sometimes you don't want to die on that hilltop. So my successes are very well documented. So I guess I don't like talking about them so much just because they're so documented. But if you think about it, I rocked up here with nothing. I didn't have a green card. I knew nobody. And in a decade, I was a multimillionaire and I traveled the world and tiger safaris in India and New Year's Eve at the Maharaj of Jaipur's palace. I mean, my life at 51, I've lived 10 lives that are less ordinary because I believed I could. Again, I said at the start, I'm a fairly ordinary person in some ways who did extraordinary things because I believed I could. And life's so short and it's so magic to live it. And don't get me wrong, I have some really bad days like people, but net, do you know how lucky we are to be in America? Even with all the craziness that goes on. I think there's 2 billion people in the world who live on $2 a day.
That's so powerful.
So, yeah, we're so incredibly lucky. You can do anything in America. And I mean, that's the last thing. My success is small compared to some of these people financially. But as success stories go, it is inspiring because people look at me and nobody looks at Zuckerberg and says, I could be Mark Zuckerberg. Why? You have a better chance. And I've said this 100 times, statistically, you have a better chance of you and I being hit by the same meteorite as we speak than be Mark Zuckerberg. It's something crazy like that. But for people listening to your podcast, for them to be Sean Conlon, not that far-fetched at all. And that makes it so much more interesting because what I did is really attainable for most people if they get stuck in and put the work in.
Is giving back, either volunteering time or giving back to the community, something part of your business values?
Yes, it's part of my values. But so here's my quirk. I love animals and wildlife more than people. So forgive me, people who are listening to this podcast, and all you animals who are listening to it. We're all good. Obsessed with wildlife conservation. And I have a little foundation, which is in memory of my father, the Conlon Wildlife Foundation. My sister helps run it, and she's a wildlife officer in Ireland now. But here's the sort of cool stuff she did. I paid for it, but she got to do the cool stuff. She went and worked in India, and we rescued 100 dogs in Kerala. Wow. We helped buy back elephants in Namibia that were going to be sold to be hunted. She goes there and for the period of time she works there, we fund a center. We funded a circus animal rescue center in Ecuador. We do really cool stuff.
Wow.
And you can see the impact. I sat on the Lincoln Park Zoo board, which is a huge deal and very nice and fancy, but it's so big and so much money, you can't feel your impact. These little things, I can see what I do. And it's not about me. It's about the impact you can have. It's so fulfilling. I mean, look, I help lots of people, of course, too. I'm not a big public charity person. I'm not the guy who buys the table and bids on the big prize in a tuxedo. Never been my thing. I help tons of people personally in my own private space and back home in Ireland. And I do it privately. And it's much more fulfilling.
I love it. That's so amazing. Sean, what are some things that you would advise the next aspiring immigrant that wants to start their own business listening to you right now?
Okay, well, the first thing is, without being pushy, you have to get out and meet as many people as you can. And you can have nice, casual conversations. Your next meeting could be the meeting. You never know who you're meeting. So you treat everybody incredibly well. Be curious. Don't be afraid to take on that next job. Take on average jobs. Don't be afraid to, I've had people who I fired who I hired for high positions were like, well, I'm not going to carry up, the water, or I'm not going to bring down the garbage and stuff like that. Do everything. Do not be afraid to do any sort of work, right? But treat everybody you meet as a potential opportunity. Doesn't mean you don't treat them incredibly well, and you can learn so much from meeting people. But get out there and meet as many people as you can without making it obvious that you're speed dating. Pick a field you're interested in and, learn about it. Read as much as you can. It doesn't need to be deep technical stuff. Read about stuff that fires your passion. Because if you get fired up reading about making it, and say you're in the solar business, read about some of the giants of solar business, and then get out and meet people in the business. Don't be afraid to offer to intern for free for a little while. I've hired more people who came on board as interns who said, I'd love to be paid, but I know you can't pay me right now. Great way to get in the door. I'll tell you a book I read that inspired me beyond belief. It was about it was about McCulloch, very famous writer here. He writes about presidents. He wrote about the Wright brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Think about this. These guys have a bicycle shop in Toledo, Ohio. They're fixing wheels and flat tires. And they're thinking, you know what? We're going to go out in the evening and learn to fly. Now, if you want inspiration, think about that. They go out to a field every night. And I'm sure the neighbors are like, oh, there go those flipping Wright brothers out to the field to try and fly again. What lunatic. And they flew. Do you need anything else? Think about that. And those things still happen in America. The scale of business, the volume of business, the ability to fail and dust yourself off and go again in this country is beyond compared within the world. You know, in England or Ireland, if you fail, you're tarred and feathered forever. You know, not here. Dust yourself off you go again.
And forget about that broken English accent, right?
Absolutely. Let me tell you something. Some of the richest people in the world are immigrants here who barely spoke English and speak English with a broken accent. I joke about my accent, and it interesting. It was a little debilitating despite its charm at the start, because we were like, well, what would he know about Chicago real estate? But it made me work harder and know even more about it, right? So you can have a broken accent, speak broken English, but if you know more about that subject than any of your competitors, that will shine through.
Right.
So
amazing.
Put the work in.
Amazing. I love it. I love it. So Sean, to wrap up, I have super fast questions for you. So what time do you normally start your day?
So I generally get up around, it varies, but when I'm really in deal mode, I get up at like 5:30 a.m., 6 a.m. Now I try to, the world's gotten a little stranger, but I always try to run or do yoga in the morning. And if I don't get it done in the morning, I religiously cut out an hour somewhere in the day to work out because it's so important. That's the other thing I've learned as I've gotten older. I've gotten really healthy, and I find I operate so much better being healthy. Now, I have a real flaw. I do tend to not go to bed till maybe 2 a.m. It's an old habit, 3 a.m.
That's bad.
I know, every night. So I need very little sleep. I sleep for 15 minutes during the day, sitting in my office with my eyes closed. I can really do that. And that's an incredible thing to be able to do.
So you're a superhuman, because if you're only sleeping a few hours a night, you're extremely productive.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I'm sure somebody could fix me, and I could probably be more productive if somebody taught me how to sleep and do all those things. So that's a bit of a flaw. I mean, it really is a bit of a flaw. And I run on adrenaline, but I don't sleep much, but I'm very, very disciplined. I mean, I'm very disciplined with my world, but I don't sleep enough, but I do get up early, but I go to bed very late. Now, realistically today, so if I go to bed at 2 a.m., I get up at like 6 a.m.
That's crazy. I wish I can do that.
No, I wouldn't advise it, because I'm sure it'd be better if I slept more.
Okay, so how many employees do you have?
I would say we only have 10 now. I've had over the years thousands, and it's wonderful because we're set up in an investment banking structure. So there's really, maybe 5 partners and 5 employees, and I'm the majority partner and stuff, but I have incredible partners. And I've had the good fortune to be partnered up with a fantastic guy who was a wickedly smart Wall Street guy for 30 years. And then my other partners are Mayor Daley and his son Patrick, who, if you read your history, the Daleys were in Chicago for 54 years and have the most incredible network. They got John F. Kennedy elected. That's one of their obviously things they're very famous for. Look them up, the Daley family. They're amazing, amazing American iconic family, considered one of the most powerful American families in the last 100 years. And I was very honored when Mayor Daley retired after 23 years running Chicago. When he ultimately decided he wanted to go into business, he told his son that he just loved the way I did business and my energy and wanted to be part of it. So that's been incredible. Yeah.
So did you sell the brokerage company, or did you kind of just slow down on that?
No, I sold it. My one residential brokerage twice, and then I sold my last one to Compass, which was kind of fortunate. They're super high tech, huge company, and They wanted to build market share, and a real compliment. They were having trouble poaching, and I don't mean that negatively because I really like the company Compass. I think they're great, but they couldn't understand why they weren't able to poach any of my agents. And while I wasn't as big as some of the real estate companies in Chicago, my third brokerage, we had super high-end brokers and we had such a strong market share. So they couldn't poach them. They couldn't understand why. And then they met me. And I remember the story. The girl doing a call back to headquarters, she was like, I met Sean Conlon, I get it. There's no way we're going to be able to get his agents. We need to buy him. So they bought me.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was that. So I love what I do now. It's very dynamic, very versatile. It's a merchant bank. We have a global reach. I have clients who wanted to build student housing in Holland and Spain and Italy and France and the UK. And I brought them in there and set up every single meeting and connected them with everybody. So I do that stuff.
Awesome. How often do you watch TV in a week?
I'm guilty of watching bad television. I'm watching something now called Alone, and it's fascinating because, again, it's another Alone. They drop 10 people out into the Arctic with 10 items, and they have to survive out there as long as they can. And the winner gets $1 million, but he ends up, or her ends up being there nearly 100 days. They have to build their own huts and hunt animals, and it's a perfect, it's a perfect parable in life. It's not the strongest guy who wins. It's the most tenacious and the most innovative. And interesting, last season, there was one mountain man who won, but my God, he nearly got beaten by 2 separate women. And it's all down to the power of the mind. So that's the sort of television I love. And I'm quite caught up in the politics of the times.
Awesome. Awesome. How many hours of work do you normally put in a week?
I'd say I'm still an 80-hour.
Yeah.
But I've huge balance. Like that being said, I fly fish across the globe. I'm going, to Egypt for New Year's Eve. Last year or the year before, I did the, tiger safari in India. I spent time in Florence and Rome this year and Iceland, so I travel crazy, but I'm accessible anywhere. I can run my business on the go at this stage, which is the dream.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. Well, Sean, I have to say that you truly inspire many immigrants out there with your story. You've come from the very bottom and built an empire. I'm sending you warm wishes and the best of successes your way. You're a huge risk taker, and I love the energy you put out. So,
well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on my show. And
You've been a wonderful, wonderful interview. You also have a wonderful style and energy to you. You make a great interviewer. You made me so comfortable. I discussed way more stuff than I intended to.
Good.
So you made me drop my guard, which makes you be really good at what you do.
Amazing. Yeah. I hope to stay in touch with you. And thank you so much, Sean, again, for taking your time out of your busy life.
No problem. Listen, take care. And I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And hey, guys, I just wanted to ask if you can give me a quick shout out wherever you're listening to this podcast at whatever platform. I'd love to give you a shout out as well on a future episode. I'll see you guys all next time for another exciting and impactful episode. Take care. Take care. Take care.